Jesus explains. Discernment, influence, way of life, error and truth. March 19th, 1947. Message 4003 from Jesus through Bertha Dudde. Spoken by Pascal. Man is prevented from recognizing the truth as long as he hands himself over to forces which are enemies of truth, i.e., it can be offered to him in its purest form, but he nonetheless lacks the power of discernment, the understanding of its value, because the evil forces confuse his thoughts, and thereby he grants access to thoughts imparted to him by said forces, misguided in nature. He could certainly resist this mental influence if the desire for truth were strong in him. Yet this too he lacks, and he is all too willing to accept thoughts that contradict the truth. Hence, he will not recognize the truth as such either, because, under the influence of evil forces, he too leads a wicked life, and therefrom emerges a world full of error, for the whole of humanity no longer lives according to God's will. The majority of people lack the ability to distinguish truth from error, because they are under the influence of evil spiritual forces, themselves blind in spirit, and thus incapable of imparting truth. Men's mental activity corresponds to their will. If it is turned towards God, then he will live according to God's will, and then his spirit will also convey truth to him, because it is part of God, and he will never hand out error or untruth. Man will also be in contact with all forces receiving light, and thus may only convey light. Light is truth. Light originates from God, being purest knowledge of divine origin. No evil forces may approach one who fulfills God's will, and they cannot mentally influence him. He will reject mental emanations radiating around him like waves. He will not grant them access, and instead he will open himself to the emanations from the kingdom of light, and he will always recognize those thoughts as truth. The power of cognition flows to him as a gift of grace from God, whose will he fulfills. For God returns 1,000-fold what man gives to him, and the fulfillment of the divine will is the surrender of one's own will. Thus he receives the purest truth from God in various forms through mentally imparted spiritual knowledge, as a spoken word, or even as a word imparted through the mouth of man, yet still emanating from God. However, it is always truth as soon as man makes an effort to fulfill God's will. Yet those distant from God by way of a loveless life, contradicting God's will always walk in error. Those will never be in possession of the truth, for they will not recognize it when it is offered to them, or they will reject it, because error appears more acceptable to them, until they change their way of life. Indeed, until they submit themselves to the divine will. Amen.